hello everyone. This will be the Necro training, well, actually specifically Scourge, Scourge training in class. I plan on going over a lot of basics, as well as a more intermediate and advanced approach on a lot of perspectives on how this class works and can be played. Basically, the way I see Necro is it's one of the highest contributors to actual kill potential on a comped group. Anything with sustain or support is kind of the way I see it, just because of how its damage syncs up together and enables you to kill an enemy group. That being said, I'm going to kind of go over just the basic build. The pretty standard build right now is Curse Spite Scourge, so I'm just going to kind of stick to that. You basically go in the Spite line, and you'll go to top, which is a Spiteful Talisman, which will deal increased strike damage to foes with no boons, and your focus and axe skills recharge faster. So every time you strip an enemy with no boon, to get to someone to no boons, you're going to do more damage, and you will be getting a quicker recharge on your important skills in axe. These two are both very good in different scenarios. I think Lesser Spinal Shivers is the more standard from my perspective, but what happens every time you hit a foe underneath 50% health, you cast a Lesser Spinal Shivers, which will do damage, chill, and remove 3 boons. The other option that I think is definitely viable is Waken the Pain. Might grant you more power and less condition damage. It's just more power damage, more power spike if you want to run it. Now this is a big one. It is Spiteful Spirit. Every time you hit your Desert Shroud ability or My C, you will do a AoE attack around you that will strip 5 targets up to 2 boons depending on if the people are below 50% health. It'll also give you resolution and it will cripple them. In the Curses line, we've got Plague Sending, which means every time you hit your Desert Shroud, you will transfer up to 2 conditions that you have on you onto your enemies. Killing Darkness is kind of niche trait. I've been a fan of it, but definitely wouldn't recommend it for most people. It just means every time you blind a foe, you'll chill them. Path to Corruption. This one is huge. This gives your second skill in Shades, Nefarious Favor, to corrupt extra targets as well. Which, as a Necro, you want to get all those strips in, and you want to get them as in the smallest window as you can. But I'll go over that as well later. So extra corrupts, really big. And then this is another big one that would not swap off of Devouring Darkness. This makes your Scepter 3 on Scourge into a even stronger ability called Devouring Darkness, and it corrupts boons from enemies around your target, inflict torment, and gain life force for each condition on your initial target up to the threshold, gain extra life force for each foe struck. Now this converts a boon on up to 5 targets. Sorry, I don't know why my mouse is drifting. And it will give you life force. This is one of the biggest sources of life force, as well as a Necro and is a Scourge in Worldly World. There's a little variation in the Scourge line in this line, and I'm gonna kind of go over both and give you the reasoning why. Abrasive Grit gives your heal skill Sandflare the ability to give barrier to nearby allies, and every time you give an ally barrier, you remove conditions from them. So, that being said, the other one that I will bring up, just because I think it is viable in certain situations, and that is Nourishing Ashes. This will give you life force every time you inflict burning or remove or corrupt a boon. Now, where this is important, and I'll kind of say what I was kind of go over in earlier, is in smaller scenarios where you're not proccing a lot of life force. Usually in the smaller scale, it's pretty common to be seen. You might not be getting enough life force from, say, these bigger chunks of life force, these blobs, all these things dying and stuff that are just going to fill up your life bar pretty easily. In those scenarios, I think Nourishing Ashes is good. But it's generally only for the smaller scale. Sadistic Searing, this gives your punishment skills the reduced recharge and cause your next manifest shade to inflict burning on foes near it. You run two punishment skills with this. You run your Sand Flare and your Ghastly Breach. So it will give you a 20% reduced recharge, which is big because those are two very big skills. And then this is a big one. And this, I think, makes Scourge really, really strong right now. Feed from Corruption. When you remove or corrupt a boon from an enemy, you gain that boon. So basically, the big thing about this spec is removing, stripping, corrupting boons. Every time you do that, you're gaining that boon. So the more pressure you're putting out, the more strips you're putting out, you're actually getting that back. So that is huge, and it makes you very strong. You basically steal your own boons. It's pretty insane. I will go into the gear. So right now the standard is pretty much power, which is Marauder stats with Scholar runes. There's definitely some other runes you can run, questionably, but Scholar is probably the most standard and what I would recommend. Run full Marauder and Scholar. You run Scepter, Dagger, Axe, Focus. There's definitely some variations when it comes to sigils, but I generally do double absorption, which I'm actually not doing in a second. Generally do double absorption. Double energy is pretty consistent, but I think Force is a good sigil. I like Force on Axe personally. And then obviously you probably want a Bloodlust sigil. On one of your sets because you're mostly doing power damage. That's basically it. It's pretty straightforward, basic stuff. So for weapon skills, you've got your Axe Focus, which your 1 will do single target damage and apply vuln. Your 2 is a very strong burst skill, which will do 8 strikes of damage and as well as give you some life force. And this is 900 range, 900 into 1200. You're on your 3 in Axe, very important skill. You'll be using this a lot. Is your Unholy Feast, which will cripple nearby foes and convert their boons into conditions. Release an Unholy Burst on foes below the health threshold. So under 50% more, they're gonna do more. It's gonna do more damage and explode. So, and that's a 600 range around you when you pop this. Your 4, which is Soul Grasp, this one's 1200 range. This will release a hand to draw life force from your foe, and it does some damage, life siphon damage, as well as vuln stacks. So if you want to get a little more life force or target a single target, definitely a good skill. Then you have Spinal Shivers. This will chill your target. It's a single target skill, and will move up to 3 boons, dealing extra damage based on the number of boons removed. Now, this is an incredibly strong single target skill. As a Necro, you do a lot of single target, you do a lot of AoEs, but when it comes to single targets, this is the bee's knees. Next, you have your Scepter Dagger, which is your 1 skill, which is just basic 1. You do a little damage, you do a little cover condies. Nothing crazy here. Your 2, which is Grasping Dead, which is a AoE damage skill. Does a little bleeding and cripple. And then you have your Devouring Darkness like I talked about earlier. Now this is going to be part of your 3 rotation that I'm going to go into. Next you have Deathly Swarm, which will give a attack that will bounce between foes, and it will blind them, but it will also transfer 3 conditions from yourself to enemies. It's a harder one to get off, but when you can get it off, it's pretty nice. And then you have Enfeebling Blood, which is inflict weakness and bleeding on foes on the target area. So this is just another strip. Utilities, we do Sand Flare, Trail of Anguish, Well of Corruption, Well of Suffering, and Ghastly Breach. Pretty standard. I guess there's some cool things you can do with Necro, but this is pretty standard. Basically, your Sand Flare is your heal skill. I'll do a little bit. I'll kind of go into this a little bit. This will you will gain barrier, and you will convert a boon on nearby enemies to torment. It will give you a self heal as well as barrier. That kind of goes back to what I was talking about, Brace of Grit. When you have a Brace of Grit, this skill will give barrier to your allies, as you see. So when you're running Grit, you can actually play around that pretty well and be very supportive. You can either use it as the proactive, you pop barrier before you engage a group. You could use it just to have general sustain in the middle of a fight. It does corrupt, so using it while you're actually going to land it as a strip as well is very optimal, actually. And then one mechanic that people just really always forget is the fact of illusion of life. When your group is running a mesmer and they pop illusion of life on you, it reses you for a short time. If you pop barrier before that time is up, you could potentially keep them alive. The next skill, and this is your stun break on Scourge, is Trail of Anguish. Now, this skill will leave a trail of sand as you travel, and you will grant boons to allies passing through it, inflicting burning on enemies and corrupt the boon into torment. Gives yourself swiftness, stability, and it's a stun break. Does do some boon corruption as well. One of the biggest changes recently, and something that I've been trying to like bash into my head personally because it's gotten nerfed, is this used to be no target cap basically. So you used to be able to just get unlimited strips by that trail. Now it is limited to 10 targets. So I definitely highly recommend only using it defensively when you need yourself a stun break for that. You have your Well of Corruption, which will target our area pulse, converting boons on foes into conditions. It will do some damage. It will convert boons. But another big thing that one reason why Necrowells are really strong right now, or been strong, is the fact that they're unblockable. Well, Corruption is. Actually, they're both unblockable. I lied. I think it's just Darkness that's not unblockable. But yeah, they're unblockable. So people Aegis, people block, you're still gonna go through that. And that's even more kill potential right there. Well of Suffering is your damaging well. Target area pulses, damaging foes and inflicting vulnerability. Does a lot of damage, gives vuln, so you're gonna do even more damage. Everyone's gonna do more damage. Now you have Ghastly Breach, and this is one of the strongest, arguably one of the strongest things about Scourge right now. The Scourge in particular. You breach into the realm of torment for a brief time, granting might to allies and slowing enemies. Convert a boon on enemies and torment each pulse. So, does strip, pulses, gives you and your friends boons. But the big thing about this is this AoE has no target cap right now. So if you're fighting a giant group and they run through that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have a cap. That is one of the strongest things right now about the Scourge profession. As a Necro, your main goal is to play on the stack with your Zerg and your comped group, and you want to be putting out damage and strips when your group is coordinating spikes. And you want to put out these strips in the forms of weapon skills, shades, wells, and breach when it's applicable. The biggest thing I like to teach Necros, and probably the most important one, is kind of syncing your damage with your group. Because you have a lot of big cooldown, high impact skills like wells and breach. that always will work better if you're doing it with your group. So when you're, if say if your commander is saying spike here, do damage here, or gives you a countdown, you want to try to sync your either your weapon skills, your shades, or if they call for wells, your well skills. This is one of the more complex things about Scourge, is how shades work. Every time you manifest a shade, it puts one of these things out. You can do up to 3, but you don't want to place 3 at the same time. These will put these marks on the ground, and when you pop your weapons, your shade skills, it will use those abilities on the shades and you. Generally, you want to have your shade down where you want to drop the damage, and then you will press your shade skills, and it will do that effect on the shade as well as you. Your shade skills are Nefarious Favor, which, like I said earlier, your shades convert a condition on nearby allies into a boon. So it will cleanse people on you and your shade who are on your squad, as well as with the trait that we talked about in Curses, will convert a boon to conditions on the enemy. This is 2 people right now with a radius of 180. So it's a lot smaller than it used to be, but it's still a very big part of your strips. Then you have your Sand Cascade, which sand rises up near your shades to shield nearby allies. This just basically gives you and your shades barrier to up to 2 people. Garnish Pillar, induce fear in enemies around you and your shades. This will put out a fear on you and your shades. And then you have your Desert Shroud. This will proc your Spiteful Spirit when you pop it, because it counts as going into Shroud as a Necro. When you enter the Desert Shroud, gaining powerful barrier and pulsing necrotic energy around your shades. So basically, it gives you Fury. It pulses damage on you and your shades. It procs your Spiteful Spirits around you, and gives yourself a lot of barrier. Every time I want to do a big damaging spike, if it's weapon skills, if it's wells, if it's breach, I like to have this proc at the same time. It's one of the easiest things to kind of proc at the same time. But basically, you want your shade out, and then you want to proc it, you do your skills. In terms of wells, and this is a very important thing for World v World, because this is something that I see a lot of groups not really coordinating. Well spikes, well bombs have been pretty consistently one of the biggest fight changers in this game mode. And that is basically syncing everyone in your group to use both your wells at the same time in order to kill something or do something else with it. Basically, your commander should call out wells in 3, 2, 1. If they don't move a timer, then you don't really have the time to set up as much, but it's still you want to make sure you pop it at the same time as them. And you would pop your Well of Corruption into your Well of Suffering. The Well of Corruption is a slightly larger cooldown, so generally you start with that. It's also going to strip before you drop your damage. So, Well Corrupt. If you're able to tell your commander, hey, my wells are back in 5 seconds, you tell your commander 5 seconds on wells, the commander knows, and then they know how to play around that. I think that's a very important aspect for a beginning Necro to remember. You want to sync these. It's probably one of the most basic things on Necro, and why kind of a beginner Necro can still be very impactful with a group. Because if you bring your wells in and you drop it at the right place at the same time, you're gonna kill things. Things are gonna die. That being said, with placement on wells, my for DPS classes in general, I like to track enemies and where they are going. If a enemy is running in a certain direction, I want my damage to be where they're going, not where they were. So say, let's just say Mr. I think this is Atros, right? Yeah, that's Atros. So Mr. Atros here, if he is moving to the side, so he's going to keep moving that direction, I can place these wells in that direction. You can follow where they're going or where they're going to be, and you can drop them there for the most impact. And obviously, sometimes you can't do that, depending on what your commander wants or where your commander positions. Sometimes it's on the commander, but I kind of always keep that in like head. Where are they going to be? If they're moving towards you and he calls Wells, it's more you don't want it where they're going, where they are like right now. You want them where you are, where they're going to be. So if they push you, say Atros pushes me now, I'm going to be dropping them here where he's going, not where he was. Wells are generally always really good on enemies when they're flat-footed, and it is up to the commander in the end, and you can always say something to them or have a discussion with them, but it's really good stopping power. It's really good kill potential. It's a very important cooldown. Like if your necros in your group are on the same page and you're landing a well spike, you're gonna have a very high impact on how that fight goes. In terms of breach, my biggest thing with breach is it's easiest used as kind of like stopping power. Like you see an enemy group push into you, you drop breach, kind of like you would drop DH traps. Um, it's the simplest way to see it. There, you can use it like if an enemy, say Atros is moving into me, I can drop a breach here, cross, and then kind of just play the piano, drop my other skills where they're going. Biggest thing is I wouldn't. This is something common with newer players I find, and even more advanced players, is people kind of greed for breaches. Don't recommend that. It's not the way I would do it. There is ways to aggressively use breaches, but it's probably one of the most common mistakes I see from Scourges is they'll kind of go offensively, drop a breach, the enemy group moves out, or they get themselves killed. So one of the cool things about Necro, and this is a little more advanced, is the ability to do skills at the same time. Like you can pop. The biggest thing is shade skills. Other than manifest shade, all these skills can be casted while you're casting other skills like Wells, weapon skills, or breach. So you basically want, like, this is more advanced, but you basically want to time as many of these cooldowns in the same place at the same time in the smallest window. That way you have the highest kill potential, the highest spike and strip potential on the same targets. That being said, you can put your shade down, you can start casting your wells, and then at the same time as those wells tick, you can be casting your shade skills and your weapon skills as well. And if you're really lucky and you just want to face stomp a group that runs into a breach, you can do your breach into your shades and weapon skills, and you're just gonna have the big kahuna and just get like massive spike. In terms of positioning, as a Scourge, it's honestly pretty simple. I think with Scourge, it's not one of those it's not a class you peel with. It's not a class that you kind of do your own thing. You want to stay really close to the commander to get all the stability, the boons, and cleanses very easily. But I generally keep like the 300 range, and that could be like, say the columns are where the enemy group is, could be like here, so you're not face checking all the damage right away. As well as just being able to move around damage that might be on the commander in that 300 range. And that's a little more advanced. Like when in doubt, just stick on the commander. Like don't really have to go into more detail about that. But Necro has the ability to drop skills while not facing the enemy. Like as you can see, as I fuck up my about face, you could do wells and stuff and shades while not facing where you're going. So being able to position while dropping damage and not being flat-footed is a huge pro to play Necro. It's great. You don't have to just sit here and just S key here. You can position around in safe areas around your commander. More advanced, I mean, if your commander wants to be in one place, keep it simple, by all means, just stay on them and do that. But definitely a really great thing about Necro is the ability that you can be looking at the enemy while running away, while kiting. You see an enemy coming at you, you breach, like you're able to keep your camera basically on the enemy at all times while you drop skills. That being said, hopefully I didn't bore you all to death. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming, and have a good night.